There's a lot of focus these days on the number of people who are quitting their jobs. Many companies feel that they don't need to worry about those people that are still working for them. However, not everyone has the option of leaving their job, but that doesn't mean that they're happy, enthusiastic, or engaged in their work. But why suddenly are so many people dissatisfied? And what don't they like about where they work? Hi, I'm Jane Singer, and thanks for joining me here on A Seat at the Table. I really do appreciate your taking the time out of your day to listen to the many outstanding people who are guests on the show. You are an important part of our global community, which has now grown to include 96 countries. That's right, we've added 2 more countries in the past few weeks. We're going to be adding a new feature to this program, and I'll be telling you more about it at the end of the podcast. Today I'm speaking with Paul Glover, a C-suite performance coach, member of Forbes Council, author of Quake, and a former trial lawyer. Paul will be sharing his insights on how leadership can identify those blind spots in their organizations that can lead to disengaged employees, how teams become dysfunctional, and what leadership needs to do to reboot, mind hacks and tricks that trial lawyers use to engage and influence juries and that leaders can use too, and the transformational value of storytelling in the workplace. Before we get started, if you are a supply chain executive who'd like to finally put an end to information overload and get a simple, concise summary of key market developments and shifts, then the current situation in sourcing is exactly what you're looking for. To get immediate access, head on over to thecurrentsituation.net. That's thecurrentsituation.net, where you can get all the details. Now let's find out from Paul what we can do to reboot and re-energize our teams. Paul, I'm really so happy that you're able to come onto the podcast because I think what you're talking about and what your focus is couldn't be more relevant than nowadays, particularly when you consider what industry is facing. Companies for decades haven't been in a situation where there has been a labor shortage, right? Particularly of entry-level people or mid-level people. Right now, everybody across the board around the world really is struggling. And a lot of companies, as you know, are raising wages and increasing benefits, which of course always helps to attract and retain people. But usually there's more to it than just money, although money helps. I'm interested in hearing what your views are on where companies might have gone wrong and what they can start to do now. Maybe we can start with why leaders fail spectacularly when, as you said very aptly, problems are hiding in plain sight.
Well, first, Jen, thank you so much for the opportunity to have this discussion with you and with your audience. Obviously, I'm passionate about it, and I do think that I've got something to say that is relevant. First, I believe that the current way that work is being performed is archaic, and it will go extinct. I actually finished an article for Forbes talking about the great manager extinction, because no one wants to be managed anymore. And companies are refusing to accept the fact that the assembly line industrial mindset has got to go away, because that's not the workforce nor the work. But it's such an easy one to manage when everybody's sitting in one location, and you can have a manager who's more like a prison guard than they are anything else. They make sure you show up. They make sure you sit down. They make sure that you do enough work not to get fired. And then you go home and you do your personal life. You don't bring it to work with you. So the whole concept of the current way work is being done is easy for managers and organizations. Because of that, we've not put any training into the soft skills required for a manager to turn into a coach or a mentor or a mediator, a facilitator, all of the things that are now necessary in the modern workplace, because the level of intelligence has increased dramatically. You're not standing at an assembly line putting together one widget 8 hours a day. You're expected to have intelligent conversations, create content, be innovative. I mean, I can give you all the trigger words that everyone says they want from their employees, but we're not doing anything to engage them. And so I just find it so interesting that we know this. And let me tell you how we know this. It's not my opinion. Gallup has been doing 20 years of engagement surveys. And over that 20-year period, the most that engagement has ever increased in 1 year is 0.05%.
Wow.
It's crazy to me that the same level of engagement was 20 years ago as it is today. What I find even more interesting that no one pays attention to is Gallup also did an engagement survey for managers. And here are the people that you are counting on to be the team leaders, to be the frontline leaders, to do the stuff necessary to engage the employees in those positions. Their level of engagement is the same as the level of engagement for the employees.
Wow.
So what you have is disengagement at every level. And once again, this way of doing this, the way of working, the way of engaging is archaic. And I believe the pandemic has given us the opportunity to break the system. And people are obviously responding. First, if they don't like what you're doing, they will leave now. And the concept that you brought up about let's increase compensation, that ranks number 16th on a list of what employees are looking for.
Wow.
If you compare with the marketplace wages, people don't leave. It takes a 20% increase for an employee to decide to leave if they have a good manager. If they have a bad manager, it takes zero. And by the way, the statistics are there. Everybody can look at them. We ignore them because we don't want to endure the pain of the transition that requires us to suddenly realize that stakeholders matter. And your primary stakeholder is not your customer, it's your employee. And if you don't have a partnership with them that engages them and makes them feel like it is a worthwhile job, they're going to leave. And, there's the network movie. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
That to me is what the Great Resignation is all about. It's not about money. It's about the fact that I hate my boss. I hate the toxic work environment and I am leaving to find something better. And by the way, anything is better. And that's the crime here. The bar is so low and we're not willing to raise it. Amazon believes that they can raise their hourly rate to $25 an hour and have 150% turnover a year. And that's a good thing.
Wow.
Yeah. So with that said, obviously, I think that we're going to break the system.
Let me ask you something. You said that compensation is number 16 on that list of what people want. So if it isn't money, what do they want?
They want a culture that absolutely takes into account not only their professional well-being, but their personal well-being. I've been around the industry, and up until the pandemic, I can tell you that if I talked to one of the people, the professional leaders in my coaching program, and said, you have to get more personal with your employees, they would have done the get back. That's not something that we are equipped to do. And by the way, HR will tell us that's not what we should do. Well, you know what? The pandemic has changed that. If you're not engaging with your team members on a personal level, that's not taking into account their needs and their well-being. And people are looking for that engagement. And if they don't get it, then the culture starts to look toxic to them. And giving them money does not change the way it works. The culture is 10 times more likely to cause an employee to quit than compensation. So it's apparent. And by the way, there is no reason for people not to know this, leaders not to know this, except they don't want to.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Right. How do you differentiate? Right. I understand what you're saying, but how do you draw the line between personal and professional? I mean, there's a saying that your boss is not your mother. How are you seeing it?
Well, because personal does not mean not being productive or not being held accountable. You're right. You're not your mother. But the reality is, if you want to engage someone now who is going through all of the difficulties over the last 2 years, You better show some empathy. Instead of saying, I actually changed my coaching style. I bill myself as the no BS workplace performance. Well, you know what? When the pandemic started, the kiss of death was for me to say somebody needed to get better.
Right.
Because they were like, we're struggling under the weight of this pandemic, and I don't want to hear that. What I want to hear is you telling me how I can feel better. Completely different conversation. Not how I can get better, but how I can feel better. And that's empathy. And right now it's required. And again, I'm a research geek because I believe that at some point you've got to have some objective benchmark here rather than my opinion. 86% of all employees say that empathy is now the number one skill set that their team leader has got to have. By the way, I don't even use the word manager anymore. No one wants to be managed. It's insane to believe, and let me make an exception. Gallup shows 17 to 20% of the workforce are toxic employees. I actually call them the working dead. They will spread toxicity throughout the organization. They love to be managed because that requires they don't do anything except what you tell them to do. Then they stop. If that's how you think you're going to run a successful company, you're insane. What you want is someone who is willing to give you discretionary effort, but you can't buy discretionary effort. You have to earn it. And the way you earn it is by empathetic engagement that allows people to understand you care about them as a human being and not as a face behind a number on the spreadsheet. So to me, it's become a requirement. And once again, I do not believe that means no accountability or no productivity or performance. People actually want to work. I go all the way back to Theory X, Theory Y management. Theory X is people don't want to work. You have to beat them. Theory Y is people absolutely want to work, and they do. They want some purpose, and they want to be productive because they feel a level of satisfaction from work, especially now.
That's very true, yeah.
And so if we recognize all of this, we've got to change our approach. So that's the personal aspect of it.
So how can leaders identify blind spots that can lead to patterns of disengagement and self-destruction? What do you see there? What's your advice?
I believe we try to complicate engagement. I believe that you first have to be present. If you're not present, if you're stuck in your corner office and you never come out, don't expect to engage with people. Why would they first? I'll give you some of the things that I tell the people that are in my coaching program when we start. The first thing I want to know is, do you have a third shift? And if they say yes, I say, when was the last time you visited the third shift? And it's cricket. Well, you know why? Well, the third shift starts at midnight. Yeah, I know. So do the people working the third shift. And my comment to that is, because I'm quite sarcastic about this, so these people actually work for a different company, right? They're not your employees. Well, no, of course. Then guess what? You need to go to the third shift. By the way, you don't want to tell the supervisors you're showing up. You want to show up, walk into the cafeteria or wherever they take breaks, sit down at a table and wait for the employees to come in. Now, the first time you do this, they're going to call the police, because they have no idea who you are and they think you're an intruder. The third time you show up and all you do is sit at a table where they are and go, I want you to tell me what you would do if you were king or queen for the day of this company. If you were me, what would you do? Now, it takes 3 visits. And at that point, once they believe you're sincere about wanting to hear what they have to say about what needs to make their job easier or better, they will start to talk to you. Now, the second part of this is you better do something with that information. But that's how you engage people, is you actually go out where they are on their turf. Because I love the open door policy. I have an open door. Nobody ever comes to your office. When was the last time someone walked in and said, I want to talk to you? That's absolutely not going to happen. Go where the people are, engage on their turf, be honest, authentic, and open. I call it empathetic curiosity.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like the way you framed that.
Yeah, it is, because first, I believe a leader has to be perpetually curious. If you stop being curious, your company stops growing. And what should you be curious about? Your job is you don't create the widget. What you do is you make sure that the people who create the widget feel good about their job. And that you take care of them, that you provide them with adequate services, compensation, health care, and that you find out what they need, not what you think they need. I love people who say, you know something, I've got a fantastic profit sharing program. My next question is, what's the average age of your employee? 22. You seriously believe that they care about a retirement plan or profit sharing? Come on. They have things that matter to them. That's not one of them.
Right.
So you've got to understand the needs of people, but if you don't ask them, they won't tell you. So once again, being present, being perpetually curious, and then empathetic listening is fantastic. If I'm an empathetic listener, active listening doesn't cut it anymore. I need to actually go deeper than that in the conversation. By the way, leaders hate that. Makes them feel too soft and gooey.
Right.
Get over yourself. If you want to increase engagement, let's do a couple of things. Let's do empathetic listening. Let's do the being present. Let me tell you the last thing. Let's connect compensation to engagement.
That's interesting. Tell me a little bit about how would you do that?
Well, it's very easy to do. If you want to find out how you're doing as a team leader, I advocate two things. First, you want to have a 360-degree review, anonymous source, right? Because if you say, well, I'm going to be one that counts the ballots, I know how the election's going to turn out.
Right.
Anonymous source who is then going to compile this information and present it to you, right? The second thing is have somebody come in, and I know people go, well, you know, I'm a coach. So every time they hear a solution, they go, well, you're the guy with the hammer, right? With a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
I say, listen, until you know what the issues are, you can't resolve them. And if you don't have psychological safety established, you got to go through that process first. So if you want to know up front what the issues are, you bring a guy like me in or a person like me, and we'll hold focus groups. It is stunning to me, Jane, that when you tell people what you say to me is absolutely confidential, what they will tell a complete stranger.
Right.
They are hungry for someone to listen to them and who will say, I'm going to take this information, not attach it to you, but to the group, and I'm going to take it back and give a suggestion or recommendation. And by the way, because they're paying me, I think they'll pay attention. People will tell you that. It's just that simple. Get in the trench. You know, you cannot lead from behind.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. And I think you're absolutely right. That has been a prevailing leadership style for decades. And if you're used to doing something and it's worked previously, it's difficult to identify that might be the thing that needs to change. Now, from your point of view, I mean, you've mentioned, you know, the problem of disengagement and lack of empathy. How do teams become dysfunctional? Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. First, obviously, if you have someone who is a bad team leader, it's just about guaranteed that things are going to go sideways. Let me continue to be the research nerd here.
Okay.
The research shows that companies' leaders select the wrong team leaders 82% of the time.
Wow. That's not...
That is just extraordinary. I mean, I can't understand how that's possible, but it happens. You know why? They take the best individual performer and they promote them.
Right.
Just because you did good in your job as an individual has nothing to do with your ability to manage or lead. And by the way, once we promoted them, then we don't give them any training.
Right. Yeah, that's very true.
So here we go. We've set someone up who was a valuable performer for failure. And then we walk away from them and we hope they can swim. And the reality is they then have the most impact on engagement happens at that relationship of the team leader and the team members. And if that doesn't work, there's nothing you can do to fix it. I mean, if I hate my team leader, I absolutely am starting to look at how I can not work hard.
Right.
Now, if you want to ask someone to do their job, you don't first you have to give them the materials and resources they need. And by the way, that's the second thing. We've gotten this idea in the pandemic as leaders that we can now do more with less.
Right.
And we think, and by the way, this is really cool because you go, well, I can't hire anyone, so I'm just going to work the people I have to death. And by the way, I'm not going to engage them. And let me be, you've tripped my trigger in so many ways. Look, I'm very simple about this. I believe that there are 3 elements of engagement that leaders have to have, or it won't work at every level. And I call them the 3 A's. And the first one is attraction. And it has nothing to do with your physical abilities to look good. What it has to do is the energy that you give to your people. I think CEO stands for Chief Energy Officer. And I believe that you have to be able to draw people, attract them to you, right? And that means not only positivity, but you also have to be competent. And you have to be authentic. You have to do all of the things we've already talked about is a part of the new leader.
Right.
And the advantage to the new leader to me, I think leaders are extraordinarily lonely. They absolutely,
that's true.
They are. And they absolutely live in a bubble of their own making, by the way. They've decided that they're supposed to be a certain way. And one is they're supposed to be infallible.
Mm.
Leaders
Good
are not
point.
supposed to make, and so guess what? I don't know human beings like that. I mean, if you want to try to have that as your myth, you'll kill yourself trying to live up to it. But we are lonely. And the concept to me is if you want to engage people, there will be a transfer of energy. That's how I do my coaching. There is a transfer of energy when I'm having a good coaching session between myself and the person I'm coaching. And when I get done, I actually am energized. I tell leaders, that's what it's going to feel like when you engage. And if you will just try that, and most of them are too afraid. They're afraid that showing vulnerability is looked at as weakness as a leader. So they need to get over that. So we've got attraction. The second one is attention. If you want to engage people, pay attention to them. Find out about their needs. Ask the questions, right? Be empathetic and curious. Find out who they are and what they need. And the attention that you pay to them will be paid back to you. What you will get is discretionary effort. And the last one is appreciation. We have forgotten how to say thank you enough in this country. We believe that the paycheck is thank you.
Right.
The paycheck is I show up for that. You don't get anything else but my hour. We're still paying for hours, by the way, which is absolutely archaic. If what we want is innovation and intellectual property and creativity, you think that that's measured by hours? Oh my God, that's just insane to me. And yet that's still how we're paid. So the appreciation part to me is absolutely that. I tell my leaders at the end of a week in the pandemic, the worst thing you can say to someone is see you next week.
Right.
That's like an invitation back to hell. This has been the worst week of my life. And you know what? You want me to come back? Don't do that. Say thank you and mean it in a variety of ways. And by the way, say thank you to the families too. If you give a gift card and say, take your family to dinner. Bring food in, whatever you want to do, because I appreciate the fact that you're still coming and working. And I want to make sure that you understand how much I appreciate you. The expression of appreciation and gratitude, they're crazy on the chart of engagement. And yet we don't do that. So to me, that's where it comes together. If you do the 3 A's, you will get engagement.
Very interesting points. And I agree with you completely. And I particularly like what you said about a transfer of energy. That is so true. I mean, you really can feel it when you get yourself into that situation. I have been in those situations myself, and absolutely, it elevates everybody.
It does.
Yeah, absolutely. One last question. You had touched upon some of the mind hacks and tricks that are employed by trial lawyers to engage and influence juries. And how might that apply in the workplace? I'm very curious about that.
Well, being a trial lawyer, which I absolutely loved, is an interesting. First, I consider it to be the closest thing to trial by combat that has rules.
Right.
Kill each other, but the whole point was to not necessarily destroy the other side. That was a side benefit. What you were looking for was the connection with the jury.
Right.
And so the first step in that connection was voir dire. Voir dire is where the potential jurors actually get on the stand, and then you get to ask them questions. And when you realize that someone was either for you or against you, that was a plus or a minus. If it were a minus, you tried to exclude them from the jury pool. Well, and you're only given so many exemptions, right? But at that point, I am studying the jurors. I want a glimpse into who they are. And if you ask the right question, and by the way, my questions were always off the, have you ever been convicted of a crime? That's usually been cleaned up already. I would ask what I would consider to be a personal question to get a real answer, rather than the fake answer that someone was going to give me to either get out of the jury or they wanted on that jury for some reason. So that to me is the beginning that every company should take off with. If you're not doing some type of personality assessment, that at least gives you some immediate information about this person, so you can understand them. And by the way, that's not the end all and be all, but it is certainly a glimpse that you need about a person. If you're not doing that, they are a cipher. And I did not want a jury full of ciphers. I wanted to know, and at the end of that selection, I knew who I could not persuade, and I knew who I could. Then I knew the people in the middle. There's a couple of shows out. One of them is Bull. I don't know if you watch television, but it's about a guy who runs a business that's a jury selection business. And also the other one that I would suggest was Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil was Oprah's jury selection expert when she was sued by the Texas Beef Association.
Oh, really? Wow.
And this is something that's important enough, because once you know your jury, your audience, then you start to connect with them in a different way. People want to see and hear different things. So that would be the very beginning. And after that, I lost my first two cases out of law school. By the way, I spent half of law school watching trials.
Wow.
I didn't go to law school. I didn't want to be, by the way, trust and wills, I'd cut my throat with a rusty spoon. I needed trial. And so I went and I watched them. But I didn't get the lesson that I should have gotten. And so first two trials I lose. And at the end of the second trial, a expert trial attorney came up to me and said, listen, for the cost of a steak dinner, I'll tell you why you're losing. Well, I'd already spent 3 years of income on going to law school. I thought, all right, for the price of a steak dinner, I need to hear this. By the way, it wasn't the cost of the steak dinner. It was the bottle of scotch he drank. Oh. But he's told me, he said, very simply, you're really good at presenting the facts, but you're not presenting the story. Mm. People want to hear the narrative, the story. And if you can't connect with them through the story, you will not make the emotional connection with the jury that you need for them to be on your side.
Right.
That's where you need to become a persuasive storyteller. And that's what I teach in my coaching. That is an obligation on the part of every leader. Become a persuasive storyteller. And people don't like that. First, they think they're bragging, and oh my God, forbid that we actually brag. If we're doing something good, let's put it out there. Let's not brag, but let's at least let people know about it. Right. So the concept of the persuasive storyteller was, first, I wanted to take the jury on the journey, and I wanted to portray my client as the hero. So we have what really is very effective in storytelling for everybody, the hero's journey.
Right, yes.
Journey has to have adversity, or he can't be a hero. There has to be a wolf for Red Riding Hood. Just a walk through the woods to Grandma's house.
Right.
It's the wolf that makes the story interesting. So to me, the adversity was why we were in court. Whatever had caused us to be there was that. And my client was now going to be framed as the hero who had this adversity and overcame it. So therefore, he ended up being a better person after the experience, but we were still dealing with the adversity in court. So let's get that out of the story. So that created the narrative that allowed me to take the jury with me. And we processed it from beginning to end. People were enthralled. You know, one of the worst things, first two trials, I actually had jurors who fell asleep.
Oh my gosh.
It happens a lot because they go out, they have lunch, they come back, and it's boring.
Right.
And my client would always go, that person, that jury number 7 is sleeping. And I would say, just leave her alone. The last thing you want to do is tell the judge and they wake him up and she finds out I ratted her out. No. Okay. But I told my client from after that second trial, I said, no juror is ever going to go to sleep on me again because I'm going to tell them an entertaining story and they're going to want to hear every word. And that's a leadership situation. You have to be telling your story. By the way, telling it once in the context of organizations is never enough. What leaders say is, I've already said this 4 times. No, it's never enough. That doesn't mean you don't change it up a little bit, but you've got to keep repeating the story because people need to hear it. They need to identify and connect. And so it's a performance. And I would suggest that leadership is a performance. Telling people, you know what we have to do, have a 10% increase this year. Everybody goes, hey, do you seriously believe I care about that? No, what I want is for you to do the things that generate the 10%. I don't care about it. That's the byproduct of having the relationship that gets the action, the behavior that generates the 10%. I don't need to tell you to generate 10%. First, I have no idea if that's possible. So for me to say something like that, you're like, yeah, whatever. So that's the kind of stuff you do. That's pretty much how my trial experience went. And you get better and better by doing what everyone tells you to do, practice.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Well, Paul, I've learned so much. This has been so interesting. How can people connect with you? I'm sure many people will want to find out more about what you're doing. I think they would definitely want to read your book. Where can they find you? PaulGloverCoaching.com. The email is paul@paulglovercoaching.com or on LinkedIn, Paul Glover Coaching. Okay, well, I'm going to definitely put that in the show notes as well, in case people didn't catch that. And I really want to thank you for taking the time for joining me here on A Seat at the Table. This has really been fabulous.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for the opportunity. I've enjoyed the questions. I think are stimulating, obviously. You knew exactly what to say to get me just to never stop talking. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience. And you have a wonderful day, and maybe sometime in the future we'll do it again.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Seat at the Table. As I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, we're adding a new feature. If you've ever listened to a podcast and thought, I have a question, well, now you can ask. We'll be letting you know about upcoming guests on our show, and you can send in your questions. Also, you can ask questions after the show, and we'll forward them to our guests for feedback. If you'd like to participate or just want to learn more, head on over to our website at seatpodcast.com. That's SEAT podcast.com for all of the details. The links will also be in the show notes. You can also leave any thoughts, feedbacks, or suggestions there, and yes, I will read it. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Jane Singer, and I will see you in our next episode of A Seat at the Table.